Welcome to Carrying Wayward, a supernatural podcast for fans who aren't ready to let go and newcomers to the series who are ready to jump in. I'm Drew Schulman.
And I'm Marie Vigourou. Today we have a very special episode for you, and we've invited a bunch of our friends in the supernatural fandom to come and talk about one of my personal favorite episodes in the series, The Man Who Would Be King. Let's get this show on the road. Because we're a lot more people on this Zoom call than we're used to, like Drew and I are kind of used to just having the two of us, the first thing I'd like to do is to do a quick roundtable of like who's here and what their relationship is to the supernatural fandom. So I'm gonna get started. I'm Mary. I use she, her, and they, them pronouns, and I co-host this podcast, Carrying Wayward, with Drew, Rochelle, and we all started this in November 2020 after the final episode of the series aired. So, yeah, that's me. Katie, would you like to go next?
Sure. Yep. I'm Katie. I'm also Nerdy Nerdenstein on AO3 or Dusty L. Cannon on Twitter. I use she, her pronouns. I have a podcast called Making It Up As We Go, where I do audiobooks for Dusty L. fanfic. I also co-host with Mary, the Gentleman Pirates Library, which is a podcast about Our Flag Means Death.
Yes, I do love our podcast.
I can't wait to get back.
I know, me too. Soon, excited. Season 2.
Yes.
Catherine.
Hi, I'm Catherine, and I'm the co-host of The Fangirl Business with the lovely Krisha, who is an amazing human, and I love her very much. We started season 15 live podcast as it was airing, and we did it in response to the fandom reaction to Comic-Con and how nervous people were after that first big event that was like the first last thing. Mm-hmm. And then we podcasted that whole season, and we're currently wrapping up a series on the Winchesters. And you can find us at the Fangirl Biz, that's B-I-Z or B-I-Z, on Twitter.
Love the Canadianness that's coming out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. JJ?
Hi, everyone. I'm JJ, or at JJBWatch, on TikTok and Twitter. I do not have a podcast, so it's just me, a person on the internet. I started watching Supernatural in January 2021 because it took over my For You page, and I wanted to be educated on when discussing certain topics that were important on my life. So I started watching and documenting my watch on TikTok because I needed something to keep me motivated and watching, and like you have to keep posting and watching and doing that. And yeah, that's how I found it and found the SPN family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your TikToks were so like I know that you don't really do them about Supernatural anymore, but like they were so inspirational for me and like always so thought-provoking. So thanks for doing that.
Thank you. Yeah, I did. I came to a stop on like actively posting episode reactions in season 7, and then I started just doing like overarching thoughts for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
And then it became a lot. There was a lot of feelings that people had sometimes. Great feelings and positive feelings and thought-provoking feelings, and also not so great. So
yeah.
I every now and then I come back to start posting, and I also have my series where I pretend to be Misha Collins's personal assistant,
Yes.
which is always fun and always. I have a couple of plans for that since Gotham Knights is now wrapping up. I have some pulling out some old stage makeup tricks of mine to maybe do something fun things. So.
Okay, I am so excited about this. Thank you so much for letting us know. That's really exciting.
Sneak peek. Very sneaky.
Very sneaky. I love it. KJ.
Yeah, I'm KJ. I'm the host of Supernatural Opinions. We started recapping Supernatural back in July of 2021, on Jared's birthday, which was not intentional, just kind of happened. I said, let's pick a Monday, but that was the Monday. And my pronouns are they and she, and we're about at the end of season 3, early season 4 at the moment. And then we also do kind of like overarching discussion episodes where we can talk about any seasons and any episodes so that, I don't have to hold all my feelings in about cast till we get to season 4.
Yeah. Yeah, and your co-hosts are really quite lovely. We recorded an episode. Well, you invited me on your podcast a few months ago, and we recorded an episode about like bones and supernatural, and I thought that was such a fun discussion. Thank you so much for having me on there.
It was so fun to have you, and both Moya and I started rewatching Bones since we recorded that. So.
A must, a yearly rewatch. And Drew, what about you? How about you close us off here?
Oh, I am Drew. I am the other third of the Carrying Wayward family with our producer Rochelle, who will be reviewing this very thoroughly, I'm sure, when it's done. I started watching the show right around the time we started releasing episodes, pretty much the week before, in November of 2020, despite being a fan of 2/3 of Supernatural, while I tried to start it a little bit when it first aired, didn't keep me on. Some of you might recall the opening of season 5, where I very plainly stated where I stopped watching initially. But I'm so happy to be back in this fandom, or to really properly join it. And for anyone who's catching up, I am up to literally this episode, The Man Who Would Be King. I have not seen the last 2 episodes of season 6. I am sorry. As some people have voiced opinions. It's okay. I will likely be binging both of them the next day, literally tonight, probably. And my pronouns are he, him. That's me in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone, for introducing yourselves. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be talking specifically about The Man Who Would Be King, and also the role of The Man Who Would Be King, not only like within the season of season 6, but also like how it changes everything, right, that we've seen up until this moment. So I thought that we could start off with a little bit of just basic information. This episode was written and directed by Ben Edlund, which is unusual for Supernatural, that the writer and the director are the same person. I believe the only time that's happened before this has been with Eric Kripke. And this episode originally aired on May 6th, 2011. So I think that's also something to keep in mind. This was 12 years ago. So,
Goodness.
12? Yes. Okay. It's a little while ago. So I guess I'd like to start off this conversation with talking a little bit about like your first impressions, like the first time you watched this episode, how you felt. Because I remember that for me, it was like this huge moment of like, oh, now I understand. Now I understand Dean. Now I understand Cass. Like there was just like this, Katie likes to call it like italicized O moment. Like that was what it was for me. And I'm kind of wondering if it was the same for any of you.
Oh, absolutely. I guess I'll just go first. It was the moment. This is gonna sound mean, but like Supernatural was hard for me to get into very like early on. The first couple seasons, they're just not my jam. I that was one of the reasons why I started like documenting it, because I was like, I have to get to the next episode because I need to watch the show. But the first couple seasons just weren't more my jam. Season 4 was where it really like was like, oh yeah, no, I get this. And then this episode was like when everything changed, and everything was like, oh, now I understand. Now I'm in it. Now I'm invested in a way that I hadn't fully been before. I enjoyed the show. I was watching. I was enjoying my time with it. But then I was like, oh, now this is when the brain rot starts. This is what everyone was talking about when they were talking about supernatural brain rot. And yeah, and it was also the first time I remember watching it the opening sequence, and at the end of the opening sequence, there were tears starting to form in my eyes. And I'm not a person who cries very often. And I was like, what just happened to me? What is about to happen to me? And what just happened? What's going on? I'm not okay. What? So yeah, big heavy impression this episode.
I can relate.
It's a Ben Udland episode, right? Ben Udland was the first writer in the show. This show was very interesting that it was one of the first shows that as I was watching, I could pick out who wrote the episode as I was watching it, because they all approached the episodes very, very differently. Ben was the first where I was like, this is a Ben episode. And it was because I knew it was a Ben episode because I liked it. And that was in the early seasons. I was like, I really like this episode. This is a Ben episode. And then getting to know when I got here, and it was like this massive episode that everyone always talked about was like, you have to get to the man who would be king. You have to get to the man who would be king. And I was like, I looked it up beforehand. I was like, this is a Ben episode. And I was like, I will like it. And then it was like, oh no, this is a Ben episode. This is a Ben episode. So yeah, that was first impression. I was just like, oof, we know what we're doing here. Applause.
Oh yeah.
I truly connect with that so much.
Well, it's nice to be able to trust the writer. Once you've determined that you trust them, then you let the story flow rather than go and brace yourself for being hurt or being disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
So.
You trust them and they deliver.
Yes.
Yeah.
So true. So
I feel like my reasons are very superficial in comparison.
Go ahead. We want to hear.
His hands were really hot.
That works with me.
There.
I mean, really it's a valid point. So
it's true. It's so true. I think for me, like the French mistake was my moment of like, what is this? Because I loved the meta. But this one, for me, there were two different things on first watch. One was the cinematography was just so different from what we'd seen before. And it was, I mean, the scene in the park with the snow and the flowers is like iconic to me. And I remember seeing it and going, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. And then the sea in the background and the fish pulling it up. Like it was such different visual storytelling from what I had been used to in Supernatural. And the contrast between the beauty of the surroundings versus the dilemma and the conflict that's going on within Castiel, I found really striking. But then the other thing is, like, this is one of his most badass episodes.
Absolutely.
Like, a period, hands down, ever. And he was just so, like, large and in charge for the whole episode. So I really enjoyed all of the smiting and the knocking demons down and all of that wonderful stuff. So for me, it was very visual that it really struck me, as well as, oh, hi, Cass.
Oh yeah, Cass had his share of moments.
Oh,
he sure did.
Oh my goodness. KJ, do you mind if I call on you?
Absolutely. The very first time I watched this episode, I was in high school. I think I watched this episode on my phone during like a spare period, and I was not watching Supernatural with any real analytical thinking skills back then. I was very obsessed with Grey's Anatomy back then. I thought I would be running a Grey's Anatomy podcast right now. I did not foresee the left turn that my life has taken. But here we are. But like that fourth wall break right before the title card where Cass like fully looks at the camera and like talks to us is just insane. Like and I remember like the real like scene that like really made an impression on me is when Cass is watching Dean rake the leaves and then like leaves him. Is like, no, we're not getting him involved.
Yeah, because it's done it's done out of like care for him, right? And we'll get to that, but yeah, it's done out of care and out of love. And yeah, it's kind of an interesting one. Katie, is there anything for you that comes up?
Well, like it's so evocative. Like there's several things. Like the very first scene, you see him sitting on that bench and he is so hunched over. Like he never had great posture, but this is like defeated. Like his shoulders are curled towards his feet, and it's such a striking picture. And then you start getting these little clips of the fish crawling up, and the thing about the fish, the whole stepping on the fish, is it like kind of galaxy brained the whole lore of angels, because you're like, whoa, wait a minute. So were you in some corporeal form when fish were crawling out of the sea? Like I know you were there, but you weren't just a beam of light. You were in a, like, don't step on that fish means you were in some form, right?
Right.
I mean,
mind blown.
That's the thing, is that like you go through this whole thing and they just kind of allude to angelic practices and lore, and this episode nails down a whole bunch of stuff that people may have headcanoned, but you know, now it's canon. And so you think about that, and then the fact that he's comparing all of these things like Sodom and Gomorrah, the Tower of Babel, and you know, the fish,
Cain and Abel
to the Winchesters. Like you're elevating them to these epic historical biblical stories, and even he places them above them. He's like, all of that, but the best one were the Winchester. And so like you see where his priorities lie, you see how he has placed that in the millennia he has lived, that this is the moment, this is the most important moment. And you see just how important these boys are, especially Dean. But he calls them the boys, like in the middle of the episode, and like that just really struck me. I'm like, oh, the boys. You know, but it's clear that he cares about Dean, and because Dean cares about everyone else, he cares about them too. It's a little bit more centered on Dean, but throughout the episode. But it's so striking, and it just explodes all of this angelic lore that you're like, well, wait a minute. So that means, what does that mean? So that's why it's such an important episode.
Shift. Like, Cass and Heaven are so old, and things have pretty much run without a whole lot of human interaction or seemingly any like God interaction for like a long ass time. And like it's been like less than 3 years since Cass like pulled Dean out of hell. Like they've really fucked shit up for Heaven like in 3 years.
Yeah, can we curse on this podcast?
Absolutely.
Okay,
we can. But also, while we're at this moment, I'm also going to take a moment to think, like, the Angels must have intervened with dinosaurs at some point. There's no way Cass didn't come down to hang out with, like, a Brontosaurus for a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, so, like, dinosaurs, the connection between dinosaurs and, like, it's a little stereotype, but a lot of people with autism have experience with obsession of dinosaurs, and there's heavy autism coding. Especially if you want to call it coding, more very blatant, but of Cass in this episode, which, you know, I went through a phase. I don't know if anyone else, but I went through that phase. So I think, you know, Cass having a thing with dinosaurs fully falls in line.
Yep. Okay, I'm seeing that a lot more now.
There you go. Oh, like, of course you would bring up the dinosaurs. I love that.
I know what I am.
That's wonderful. So, Drew, you're the one who's, like, seen it, like, you saw it last night for the first time.
I was going to say, I remember it like it was yesterday.
Oh. So this
but yes,
is all
yesterday,
very fresh.
This is incredibly fresh. I've not even had a full 24 hours to, like, wrap myself around it properly. But really, I think everyone kind of hit on points that I was so in love with, because it really was... I truly understand that I am spoiled in the sense that I am watching the show with so many people who care about my viewing experience. that I'm getting a much better view of it. And this is why I didn't fall in love with the show the way I think I would have the first time. But this episode, I think, like you said, JJ, would have been my turning point fully, because it really is the moment where we get to like learn and connect and feel, and it's no longer just a monster of the week show. It is truly a dramatic story. It is like on the like levels of like a heroic journey with like emotions and stakes. And to mirror the beginning of the episode, for me, I think the biggest thing, the thing that really like dragged my heart, was the end of the episode. And Cass is sort of just like looking for an answer and not getting one, while also doing some of the best editing I've ever seen on the show.
It was so different than how they ever, the cuts they made and how he was talking before they cut, and like, it like really
it makes you feel disjointed. It gives you like, it forces you to put yourself in his shoes, where he's like, the next thought is coming out is like already there before he even finishes the last one, because he's rambling for trying to find an answer.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think like part of what makes this episode so memorable is because it's such a departure from everything that we had seen before on Supernatural, right? Like there's just a couple of things that we talked about, right? Like the breaking of the fourth wall, the fact that it's in Cass's point of view, the editing, I would argue even like the storytelling is different in this episode. Like, so yeah, it's just, I find it so interesting that for so many of us, this episode is so important, and yet it's so different from the rest of the series. Like, I'm not too sure how to reconcile that. Like, is it because we would have wanted more episodes like that, or is it because it was so different? Yes, of course we want more.
Well, and it serves such an important point for everything you've seen in the season. And like we say, okay, when Kripke left and Gamble took over, right, and you're watching season 6 and you're like, what is happening? What's wrong with Sam? And what are they talking about the souls? They're not answering the question. Like other CW shows and Supernatural, they go at a rapid pace, but they drop a clue, and by the end of the episode they're kind of revealing it, and then they move on. And it's not a monster of the week, but they tend to give you that satisfaction instead of leaving you scratching your head going, what is wrong with my beloved Sam? What's going on with him? This is weird. And so we always say, oh, well, season 6 is hard because they were trying to find their feet. They didn't really know where to go because they had this wonderful 5-season arc. And then they're like, where do we go from here? But really, this episode shows they knew what they were doing the whole time. They just weren't going to tell you yet. So it's a very important episode for Cass's character, but it's a very important episode for season 6 to show, hey, we knew what we were doing the whole time. We weren't just flailing.
Yeah.
So
I agree. And I actually, I made a list of things that were revealed in this episode because we learned so much. And I haven't rewatched, this was literally the first time I rewatched a bunch of episodes together since the series finale. So it's been a while. But we learned for the first time just how long Cass has been around, and how long he's been part of creation. We also learned that he rescued Sam from hell, and that he didn't know that Sam didn't have a soul. We learn that it really leans into the belief that God is somehow working through Cass, possibly, and that's something that was kind of touched on at the end of season 5, but this one really leans into that question of how involved God was in that decision to bring Cass back and why. And then we learn about the souls and why he's after all of the souls. And we learn that he specifically kept Dean out of things to protect him and didn't want to suck him back in. So it's and we learn all about how the war started in heaven and why it started and what the motivations were for everyone. So there's just so much information revealed in one episode. It's just
not to mention what's going on with Crowley and where Samuel Campbell came from.
Yes.
Because they're I don't know, he was back. This is why. It's kind of, yeah.
That's right. And it's just like a one-liner. Like, yeah.
I'll be honest, I have no recollection of them talking about Samuel. Can you remind me?
Oh, yeah, when they were in hell, when they're all standing in line, and he said, "Well, we'll bring the Winchesters in to do this," and Castiel said, "No, not Dean. Dean's retired." And he goes, "Oh, well, I know some bald guy who I can call up."
That line does not exist in my head. I believe you, but
It's just such a throwaway. It is such a throwaway. And you're like, "Oh, Samuel Campbell."
Yeah. Yeah, they knew what they were doing.
How am I still being shocked by this episode 24 hours later?
Well, to that, piggybacking like off of all of what just happened, I think one of the things about this episode is that, so like, it breaks a lot of the rules of the structure of storytelling that had been established in the show. And if you look back through the past 6 seasons, the episodes that do that, the episodes that break all the rules and change, they're all written by Ben Upland. They're all written by him. You know, Monster Movie is written by Ben Upland. The earlier one that happens in season 6 that's the big one where they go with the metal one.
Mistake?
Oh, French Mistake.
The French Mistake is written by Ben Upland. Like, they're all written by him, and it's.
I need you to change your little moniker down there to be like, Ben Edlund's number one fan.
Honestly, I might do that. Maybe after I finish this. Honestly, yes.
At the end, we'll all have it on ours too.
That is my goal at the end of this.
I keep saying the moniker should be Ben Friendlands.
Perfect.
I think he would love that. But anyway.
But I think the point is that the point that I'm getting to is that in order to break the rules, you have to know the rules, and you have to know the world, and you have to understand the greater story that you're telling, and understand the purpose of the story that you're telling. And I think that this episode really, really showed how tuned in to what Supernatural was, what it wasn't, and what it could be. And I think by breaking all of he broke the right rules in the right way. Like, this is the second time I think we break the fourth wall. The first time being Chuck breaking the fourth wall the season before. That second time of like breaking the fourth wall, and the first time being direct address, like, it's like those small little changes of like breaking the rules. The flashback, the story is told like a memory play. It's a memory play of an episode, which is not very common. We don't do that in Supernatural. The way it's the first time that it's really from a perspective that isn't one of the Winchesters, have it being from Cass, like just breaking all those rules at the right time in this overarching arc of a season. Like 2 episodes before, we have 2 more episodes in the season. We finished the first, like you did the first arc of Soulless Sam, and that ended at the halfway point. You're moving on to the second half. You're needing all of these pieces to come together, and all those dropped hints, trying to figure out how do we tie up all of this together, and how do we do it quickly. Giving it to Ben Upland and telling him, hey, write an episode where we break all the rules.
Yeah.
It's
an episode that has some of the best lines of dialogue ever. Like,
absolutely.
Freedom is a length of rope and God wants you to hang yourself with it.
That's not something we hear on Supernatural, right? Like that kind of like lyricism almost, you know? Like, it feels like a Taylor Swift song. Like,
it does.
It really
I
does.
love that line so much. I swear I'm gonna have that tattooed on my body someday. I have it on the t-shirt I'm wearing right now. I'm wearing a Cass t-shirt right now.
I love it.
Well, it feels like the actual lyrics in the songs that are so important on the show. Like, thinking about just carry on my wayward son has incredible lyrics to them. Like, they're very deep and very emotional and very lyrical, and all of the music of these, you know, rock gods that they play and everything, the really, really good ones and the ones that are really, really embedded in the show are incredibly lyrical and are incredibly deep. And they use that in order to tell those emotional beats without actually having, because, you know, men can't have speak emotionally, but we
Right.
can play some 80s bangers and 70s bangers and tell the emotion that way. So yeah, that lyricism, and that's what breaking of that rule of we're going to tell this like emotional story through these beats of music, in the lyrics of these music, we can just say it and be one of the really first times that, someone takes hold and actually just says the thing instead of.
Yeah.
I find that really interesting in terms of what it says about Cass. Like, both like Cass's masculinity in the narrative, but also like Ben Edlund's understanding of Cass's masculinity. That he's allowed to say that.
Ben Upland's understanding of the masculinity in the show of
Yes.
of all three of them. I've always say those like Sam and Dean are two sides of toxic masculinity. They're the two opposing, like, acceptable versions of man, of like how to be a man in society in 2005, like,
Right.
like from this perspective of in moment in time. And like that's where their flaws, like their flaws come in, sometimes their virtues, like they're the two aspects of it, or the two sides of that coin. And Ben, like this is really Ben, me just going around great creative writer Ben is. Him understand, he often would be able to point out those flaws or point out that aspects and have an understanding about why those aspects came to be, how they came to be, how they affect their lives. And what was great about Ben is he would either have them work on it in the episode and like make change and move forward, or he would set up a situation where they can't move forward and that detriments them later. And which is not always the case in Supernatural, where often sometimes there are aspects of toxic masculinity are proven correct, like are proven to be virtuous or good for the overall narrative. And so with Cass specifically, you have this version of masculinity that doesn't exist, like from the get-go, is a challenge to the versions of masculinity that exist already on the show. And it just keeps building.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
I have a question.
Oh.
And it comes with a caveat, as Mary knows most of my questions do, because I know you can't spoil me. But I'm wondering, JJ, you pointed out that the only other time we've really had a fourth wall break was when Chuck spoke to the camera, essentially. Do we feel that having Cass do the same has a greater meaning? I'm not asking, like, do we find out in this next two episodes that he is the new god? Like, we already kind of have that as, like, the going on. But is this designed intentionally to compare Cass to Chuck in a way?
I think that was intentional. Like I think it is. I think it was a moment of understanding that the story, because that was the meta narrative, was that, or that version, the first version of the meta narrative was Chuck, writing and being an author in some way, and communicating to the audience about the story, right? Like, this is a story that is happening. And so having Cass be the one to say this story has gone off the rails,
yeah, I love
is
that.
really, really effective about comparing who is running the narrative now, and who is pushing and driving the narrative forward. And Cass, when he was introduced in season 4, was a plot device and a character device in order to love the little cameo.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I love Zoom Cats. Thank you so much for sharing it with us.
Just like, oh, that was delightful. Cass was introduced in season 4 as this narrative driver and this character driver and to rapidly develop Dean as a character. And so his really was a pushing force in those last 2 acts of the initial overall narrative. And now you have a plot driver and a character driver that doesn't a train with no tracks. Like, he is now an engine keeping this train moving with no direction. And it
Yeah.
was, I think it's purposeful that he is the one to break the fourth wall because he's in charge and he doesn't know what to do.
Mm.
It comes back to like the title of Katie's podcast, right? We're making it up as we go, which is that moment that kind of broke the rails, in my opinion, right? Like that moment where Cass helped Dean to get to Sam back in season 5.
Mm-hmm.
And what a mind fuck that was for Cass. Like, wait, we
Right.
can do that?
Yeah.
And when he's trying to talk to his fellow angels in this episode, they're like, no, give us direction. He's like, no, you don't understand. There's this thing called free will. It's amazing. And they're like, no, we don't like that. But just how much that impacted him.
Right.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we've talked about on my podcast with Krisha a lot is the idea of authorship and authority.
Mm.
And so I think it's really interesting that Cass is the one telling the story in this episode. And I think that is significant that he is the one who is telling us the story. And it's the first time since Chuck that we have had somebody directly addressing us in this way. And I think too, the way that it's structured. So he's telling us the story. And so I think they are saying something about his authority in this situation. But the text itself is a mishmash of confusion and conflict. Just if you look at it structurally, you've got the clear bookends, which are nice, but are full of questions. But then you have sorry, my cat is
That's totally
Adorable.
Fine. Yes, we can hear him purring ever so slightly, and it's genuinely so soothing. So
I'm
perfect.
glad.
The ASMR portion of the show.
Yeah.
So then you have the structure of the rest of it, which is present tense interrupted by past tense,
Right.
jumping to monologues where nobody can see him and he's telling us his innermost thoughts and they're intruding into the present day narrative. And so it's this mishmash of different stylistic choices with the narrative. And the last part of it is unanswered questions. And so I think that it's doing something really interesting with the structure of it that's structurally showing how Cass is in charge, but he is spinning out at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And really struggling with this role that he doesn't feel built for, even though at the same time he's being told this is what you are built for. This is what you should be doing. So it's a really interesting device that I think is reflecting there, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. And I think one thing that's really interesting about that is that throughout most of this episode anyway, it's Crowley that's telling him, oh, this is why God brought you back. This is why
Yes.
you're here. This is your purpose. And I remarked, slightly sarcastically, I would say during our live watch that like it was interesting because for Sam it took Ruby a lot longer to convince him that like that was his purpose, right? Like in throughout season 4, but that Cass kind of was very trusting, and through like what we're hearing Cass say, he talks about pride a lot of the time.
Yes.
And I just find that really
Catherine, something you said made me think of a question. So like whenever you watch this show, it's kind of a third person. You're viewing this as it happens, right? But this episode, Cass is the storyteller. Do we think he's a reliable narrator?
That's a really good question.
Drew, what do you think?
Drew's
Please
like-
give us your thoughts.
Well, I was going to say, based on the answers to my last question, I kind of got the vibe that there's this really nice like division between Chuck, who is very clearly telling a story with a very clear like narrative, versus Cass, who is doing both this episode. He's telling the story in the past tense in his like noir detective style. But then when we cut to present day Cass, he is like completely lost and looking for answers.
Mm-hmm.
So it feels like he's telling two stories. He's telling the version that makes him look good, even though it really ultimately doesn't, because he gets called out and caught. But the version that is the truth as plainly as possible, that puts him in the best possible light. And then we see how much he really is kind of freaked out and panicked by it all.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess to answer your question, no, he's not a reliable narrator. I believe him, but I think he's skewing things a little bit in his favor here because, as you pointed out, every time he messes up, he always goes, I messed up, but I did it for Dean. I messed up because of my pride. I messed up because I was forced to be in this position. It's always, but.
And most people do that. I mean, ultimately, like when I was talking to my spouse, the other day, and he was irritated with me, and I was like, I need you to understand that what I'm saying comes from a place of loving you and caring for you. So like, if that helps, even though what I said upset you, I'm trying to love and care for you. So like him saying, well, it was because of my pride. I mean, this is just his confessional. So hopefully he's being truthful because he's hit rock bottom and he's like, okay, I got to lay it all out so I can figure this out. And that's why it's so frenetic, because he's like, well, because this happened. Well, so this happened, but this happened. And so hopefully he is finally telling the truth when he's been lying this entire season.
I love that as a counterpoint.
Yeah. I think another really interesting aspect of this that I'd love to hear people's thoughts on, that I just noticed when I was watching this time, is at the beginning, when we have that fourth wall broken, it's when he looks at us as the audience, and so we're left like, oh, is he talking to us? Like, who is he talking to? Is it me? Like, and it's this really interesting device. And then at the end of the episode, you find out he's not talking to us, he's talking to God. But what does that mean about the audience interaction and like, who is God? And so I was really interested in like meta thoughts about that from everybody else. Again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, of course. This is such a really good question because I think as you were making your point, I was like, oh, yes, it's true. And then at the end, we hear like, please give me a sign. I need a sign, right? And I have some thoughts about the sign, but I think it's really hard for me to answer this question without trying to pull from future seasons. But I think that this idea of like, again, control of authorship and who is in control of the story becomes like the question of Supernatural, really. And I think the role of the audience with the control of that story is more and more clear as the seasons go on.
I think the meta narrative has, was always started to was sprinkled in, especially early on. And it seemed more like it very often was a joke at the beginning.
Yeah.
Very much was just like a way to communicate with the audience in a way that was direct while also could exist in the world. And then it of course grew and grew and grew and grew, because when they've somehow were able to, I mostly accidentally, kind of on purpose, set up this really beautiful conversation about where the audience is just as much of a impactor of the story as the characters are, almost like a play, where the audience really is interacting in a way and feeding to what is happening on stage or in the show, and really interacting, like in The French Mistake, Misha texting and tweeting the actual tweet of the show, the pulling of us in and making us a part of the story in a way with actual impact, while also not trying to have us have impact as like trying to create a show and be creators and authorship, and like we have 22 episodes a season and we have a deadline, and you don't actually have any power. Also like drawing us into the narrative in a really interesting way.
But they also listen to the audience. I mean, they do. The audience had a complete. No other show was like, "Oh, we can't do that. The fans will freak out." And you're like, "What? Do your show. We can handle it." Oh no, they can't have a love interest right now because the fans will attack the actress. Wow.
Yep.
Yeah, the actual. Well, there's a part that I want to add to that, but we can't get there.
I know.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
It's okay.
Just adds to the overall suspense. You have us back. This panel back later.
There we go.
I'm so down for that.
100%. KJ, is there anything you'd like to add to this? Because
I feel like I've never been so glad that I didn't just start talking and I had a chance to listen to what everyone else had to say. Because I have so many thoughts about so many things, but
it's hard to put them together sometimes.
Yeah,
I totally
just
get that.
Thinking back to like the last time that we were spoken to, which was Chuck, like that ended with Chuck saying like, yeah, endings are hard, but like things don't really end. And then we see Sam outside of Lisa's house. And then this episode, like one of the very first things we see is Sam outside of Lisa's house. Like it does kind of just pick right back up there with Cass talking to us, even though for us that was a while ago.
Yeah, that's right.
I love the way that they inserted earlier bits into this episode and then blew them up and expanded them. Yes. I'm so glad that you brought up that moment because we get to see so much more of that moment in this episode. We get to see like that moment where Cass explodes and then like he's not exploded and his thoughts about what happened. I mean, it takes these moments and it visually takes us back into them and then it goes boom, like more. Which is so exciting to me.
What I find also really interesting is that this is the first time that we learn that Supernatural lies, right? Like it has no problem lying to us as a show in service of the story, right? So that moment of Sam standing outside of Lisa's house, we now see in a completely different way because Cass, I can't remember if there is a shot or not of Cass in the background or something, but like
yes,
he is, yeah.
Okay, thank you. But now we know that what we're shown isn't always what actually happens. And so I talk a lot about my distrust of Supernatural. And this is one of those things where like, oh, okay, yeah, you say this happened. I won't believe it until I see it. And even if I see it, I'm not sure that I believe it.
Right. It's like, how much more do we need to zoom out to see the full picture, literally, in this case?
And one of your questions was, could this have happened in the Kripke era? And it's like, Kripke seems like a much more straightforward storyteller. And playing with all of this doesn't seem like his bag, even though he did play with stuff with, French Mistake, and he looks like he delegated that and, changing channels and stuff like that, but much more played for comedy. Everything that's been meta has been, seems to be for comedy. Like even the convention thing, when they had a convention at the hotel and they had a hunt there, that was played more for laughs, and this one was not played for laughs. It was they really used all those tropes and said, no, we're not going to make them chuckle at it. And so if you look at like Kripke's style with the boys, he's much more like linear and shocking and not willing to kind of try to evoke some serious thoughts in his audience. He's more like, here it is. So
yeah, that's right. That's actually a really good point.
I think it's really interesting too, and I don't know if this would have been a thing that happened with Kripke, but the way that we move back and forth in this tension between everybody caring about Sam and Dean and everybody caring about Cass, and then this connection between Cass and Dean that goes beyond that. And it kind of flips back and forth between the two things throughout, especially the beginning of the episode. And then towards the end, it's more and more and more like focused on the Dean and Cass relationship, which
Mhm.
I don't know if they would have gone into that. And this is the season, correct me if I'm wrong, where we have the profound bond
Yes.
thing brought up for the first time. Okay. So I don't know if
Yeah.
that would have happened during Kripke. And
Yeah.
this is continuing to expand upon that and again blow it up. Like this whole episode is about blowing things up and like making it more, right? And you can see that like Sam says he would die for Cass, but the only person who's consistently standing up for Cass is Dean through the whole thing, even though they're treated as the boys, and even though it's always talked about in the plural by everybody else. It's the Cass and Dean relationship that really you get to see more and more of. There's something different here in this episode, and I don't think we would have gotten that in Kripke.
Well, and I'd put that in my notes. I said this is post the more profound bond moment, so it's clear that Dean is Castiel's person. He cares, he cares for him more. But and like even the way they confront him, Sam is very angry, and he's like, "You've been lying to us," and Dean's like, "Hey, look me in the eyes. Let's just talk. Let's talk. You got to level
That
with me,
moment.
man." And so this is much more like someone who you've had a deep relationship with who has betrayed you, and you're like, "Okay, you're hiding from me, and you can't hide from me. If we really connect, you'll tell me the truth and I'll believe it."
I think that really goes to the way that they show versus tell with Sam and Dean, which is an overall thing that happens in the show is that they often tell us about Sam, but then what becomes really impactful is what they show us with Dean, and the way that they show the relationship between Cass and Dean. When they do hit those moments of more profound bond, it makes sense and it hits really strongly. Or what you were saying about like the look, and while Sam is, or like so much of the conversation and the interactions between Cass and Dean in this episode are just them looking at each other, and those are the really impactful moments while you have Sam speaking. I also think like that's why earlier in the season, we always talk about like the jokes. I'm putting jokes in quotation marks for a reason about like Cass and Dean being a couple that exist in the show. We have one between Sam and Cass in this season, and it doesn't land. Like the joke doesn't work earlier this with Soulless Sam. It was like I remember when it happened, I was like, that doesn't work. That's not that wasn't funny.
No one thinks that.
No one thinks that. Why would you think that? And like really break it down. Why? Like Cass actively was like rude to Sam earlier, like in several scenes earlier in this season, the season before. Like, why would we? It doesn't work like that. So just like the way that the show versus the tell, and like Sam has to say the words "I would die for Cass," but with Dean, that isn't a question in the audience's mind about whether or not he would because of his actions. And so it really becomes like, while Sam is having that whole like confrontation and Dean is there, like Sam and Bobby are like speaking, but no one's focuses on what Sam and Bobby are saying. Focused, even with the camera itself, and such strong directing moment and cinematography and Ben creating of this moment is he has this conversation happening of Bobby and Sam speaking, and the camera is on Dean, and it's just like, this is what's important. It's not what's being said. It's the showing of the relationship between these two people.
One thing that that's both part of the dialogue and the directing here is when Cass says, "I did this for you, for all of you," right? And it's that moment of like, "Oh yes, for all of you." And this happens once again, I think, or before, and they're in the hospital room when Bobby's been injured, and he's like, "For you, for both of you," or something, but the camera stays on Dean and Cass. Like, that Sam is in the background, but like never is he ever showed. Like, it's just, oh yeah, it's true, Sam is there too. Oh yeah, we forgot about that. And it sort of feels, especially in that really intense moment when they've trapped when they've trapped Cass in the holy fire, like I always have to remind myself, oh yeah, it's true. Bobby and Sam are there too. Because really, like, this moment is between Dean and Cass because he has stuck up for Cass so much throughout this episode that it's really about like Dean's realization that something is going on, and it's about that relationship specifically crumbling, really, or going up in flames, however we want to see it, right?
Well,
I feel like
Go ahead.
I feel like going up in flames is a bit
I know. I
on
just
the
wanted to get a
nose.
reaction. I'm sorry.
It's the first time that Dean has been wrong in the show.
Mm.
It's the first time in the
Ooh.
narrative of Supernatural that Dean is wrong. Just
Right.
because Dean in the earlier seasons is fulfilling all of these roles. Like Sam is the protagonist hero, like structurally speaking, he is the hero protagonist of this story. And he has to go through the trials of the hero of the protagonist if we're talking about like the journey. He has to make the mistakes. He has to do those things in order to learn and grow and go through that. Like you could probably break down each season and each things that he does wrong. Dean is playing all these other roles. He's playing the Lancer, he's playing the mentor, he's playing the smart guy, he's playing the tough guy, he's playing the, the older brother figure. Like he's playing, he fits all these other roles to Sam's protagonist. And in doing that, he can't be wrong in the overarching narrative because Sam has to learn and Sam has to make the mistakes in those points. Like thinking about the whole Ruby situation, thinking about even just the going to hell and everything. Dean has to, narratively speaking, always be right. And so this is such a huge moment because Sam is always making decisions based off of what he believes internally, and Dean is always making decisions based off of a belief code, and that is instilled in him by John. This is, generally speaking. And Cass's was the exception to that rule, and Dean was wrong. And so watching him have like this crisis of faith,
Truly.
and then it failing him, like his faith failing him, is just a really powerful moment. And it allows Dean to become such a larger character, because as soon as your characters can fail, then you have something interesting happening. And watching Dean fail in this way, or be wrong in this way, we've seen him fail before in other moments, but like watching him be his entire belief system like fall apart in that moment it's
similar
really
to
powerful.
On the Head of a Pin when he's crying in the hospital bed after he, with Azazel, right?
Yes.
Azazel, yeah. There's too many demon names.
Alistair.
Yeah, I always get the two mixed up.
Sorry, I knew I got it wrong.
I totally, yeah. You're right. Too many A names.
Too many A names especially for the demons.
Somebody, so they were talking about Bobby. Bobby and Sam were there. There's a line that Bobby delivers when it's the kryptonite scene. That comes off as extremely fake. And Jim Beaver's an excellent actor, so it feels like Bobby's like, and I don't know the exact word. I was gonna look it up, and I was like, that's gonna take too long. But he said something like, "Oh, I'm just totally beside myself thinking that Cass could betray us." And like the way it's delivered, I'm like, are you? Are you really? Because he's much more savvy than that. Like he's always, and I'm like, are you just saying that for Dean's benefit?
There you go. That's what I was gonna say.
You're saying that to make Dean feel better. Like we know we care about him just as much as you do, when that's not true. Because Bobby is treating him like a corrupted hunter, like someone who used to be on their side, but they've went to the dark side, so they got to take care of him. But when he's talking to Dean, he's like, "Oh no, I'm just as heartbroken as you are." No, you're not. And the line doesn't come across as extremely genuine. I don't feel like.
No, I agree. I remember when it came out feeling a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Sorry, KJ, I cut you off.
No, it's okay. It reminds me of like a parent who's like never liked your boyfriend, and then your boyfriend turns out to suck. Like, they're like,
well,
oh,
if you think
of course
an
you're
angel
upset.
is a supernatural creature, Bobby's never going to be super comfy with a supernatural creature. So he's finally like, what did I say?
And like every other angel they've met has kind of sucked. eventually. So it wouldn't be out of the realm of Bobby's like perspective to just be like, yeah, I don't fully trust that guy. He's been helpful, but
Yeah. I don't want to end the discussion with this, so I want to bring up there's one low point in this episode.
Okay.
Oh.
I feel like making the character Ellsworth be an exact replica of Bobby, I don't feel like it landed. I felt like it was too campy. Like, he had the bowls of blood, and then he's talking to them, and then he answers the FBI phone, and I'm like, and he's wearing the hat and the flannel, and I'm like, okay.
The hat was a bit much.
It's a bit much. Like, what, did he go study Bobby? No.
I believe that, though. I legit believe Crowley is the kind of person who would like find a Bobby knockoff because clearly it works.
True. Okay. Well, I'm glad I brought it up because you made it better.
I gotta say too, I'm all for a bit of camp, especially in very serious episodes.
True.
So like the different bowls of blood. For me, I started watching Supernatural when it first aired, and for me, the turnoff point was when, oh gosh, not Ruby, Meg. Thank you. Slit the guy's throat and then got the thing full of blood and started having
back in the day.
yeah, like way back in the day, and I was like, nope, I'm out. That's a little too dark. So the fact that it's the same setup here and it's freaking hilarious and just like on the phone with these different demons, I loved it, and I was down for the camp.
Okay.
Yeah, that to me, like I get where you're coming from, but that to me, like I said, is very much it's Crowley's sense of humor almost.
It's true.
I also feel like it's kind of because this happens like within the first half of the episode, let's say. And it's like, oh, we're in for like one of the funny episodes. Oh, this is what it's going to be. And then like the second half is absolutely emotionally devastating, particularly I would say like the last third of it. And so I thought it was a fun way of like, again, tricking your audience, lying, like, and I'm using very strong words, but like lying to your audience or like hoodwinking them a little bit and to say like, oh, this is what you're getting. No, this is not what you're getting. Look at what you're actually getting.
I feel like Ben Edlund was sitting there writing that and like Buck Lemming dropped in and they're like, it would be funny. And he's like, all right, God.
You get one funny in my emotions.
I'm not against it, but it's just I just want to bring it back very briefly to like Bobby and Sam, because like it really does feel, especially because we've just watched like the episodes that come before this one, right? And there's like a lot of like, I don't want to say coddling of Dean, but definitely wanting to preserve him, because they're like, oh no, like don't worry, because they know they need him on their side. Otherwise, like he's just gonna pray to Cass and Cass is just gonna show up and he's gonna be like, oh, by the way, do you know what these two think? So they know that they have to be really strategic about how they approach him. And again, I think that speaks to the bond that Dean has with Cass, because it's not like there's nobody else like that.
And there's not life. They're seeing it. It's not just us seeing it.
Exactly.
They're seeing it.
Everyone knows. Everyone in the room knows.
And
Sorry, go ahead, please.
I was just gonna say, it was like it's in the story. Even at the end of the episode, Cass goes back to Dean at the end of the episode.
Yes.
He goes back and pleads again, like, and just the way that's the final beat of this story, of where he brings it back to this relationship, and specifically Dean brings it back to the relationship and goes, I am asking you not to do this. And that whole moment, and just to do it because I am the one asking, do not do this. It's just a really, the story is built in a way to show that this is the important relationship and this is the thing that is crumbling, and this is the conflict of the whole season, is their relationship.
What's that saying? Ought to have the confidence of a mediocre white man. Like, he's asking these cosmic beings to do his bidding and to do what he wants them to do. And they're like, he said, Dean, it's not broken. Like, you don't get it. Shut up. You haven't been where I've been. You haven't seen Raphael. You don't know the threats that are being made. And Dean's like, nah, I think mine's the right path.
To be fair to Dean, Dean has done this to Cass before, and Cass has done it.
Yes!
I keep going back to it's one of my favorite scenes when Dean asks Cass to betray Heaven for the first time.
Yeah.
And Cass is literally like, I cannot. The wrath of Heaven will come down on you and me and everyone around us. And Dean was like, no. You got to trust me, man. I know what I'm doing. And Cass just has to stand there and go,
maybe
if this were to happen, I can't stop you. No one could stop it. And that's why I can't help you. Wink.
The side
wink.
eye.
And they're in pink and blue lighting. Hint, hint.
Oh, good lord.
Oh, no one. That storytelling. But it just to Dean's credit about that, he has done it before with Cap, and it has worked.
True.
Yeah.
It's true. And like, I think that I had a few thoughts about that last scene with them. And one of them was just, good Lord, can those two learn to communicate with actual words and complete sentences and thoughts? That drove me, like, they interrupt each other. Like, Cass is saying, like, it's for you, but he's not explaining, like, the scene with the rake in the garden and how he wanted to save him and protect. Like, if you would just explain, and if Dean would just listen and not interrupt you and call you a friggin' child, like, ugh. That, like, I was literally, as I was watching that scene, getting so frustrated with both of them.
To that communication point,
Yes.
bringing back the thought that I had earlier about the autistic coding of Cass in this episode, that last scene very much reads as two people who, maybe one is neurodivergent, maybe one is not, maybe two people are neurodivergent ways, but when I first watched it, I was like, oh, this is an autistic person trying to communicate as best as they know how to someone who is neurotypical, which we could talk about Dean being neurotypical another time, like, not really, but this scene specifically.
Right.
And the miscommunication and not taking both of them the not taking of the steps to reach that point of communication, because they're saying the same things to each other.
Yeah.
Cass is saying, I am doing this for you. Do this for me. Like, they're talking straight past each other, and they're coming from the same place emotionally about wanting to keep each other safe and wanting to do the right thing and trying to get through this problem, but they keep talking past each other. And it, because of the earlier points in this episode about Cass and how they have framed him in this episode and the autistic coding of his character, that moment hits to me, it hit in that way of the two styles of communication not meshing that way.
I've got to say, if somebody called me a freaking child in the middle of a conversation where I was being very earnest, I would have a difficult time engaging meaningfully with them after that.
Someone whose entire life is such a small fraction of yours, like super old.
And he had
like
just
35.
called him a baby in a trench coat, like
Yup.
2 episodes ago.
He was so mad about it.
That infantilization, though, of autistic people and the way that they think and communicate, it was just like, I was like, I didn't know. Just got...
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I hadn't thought of it that way before, so thank you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Just to kind of come back to Cass's pleading about, like, give me a sign, give me a sign, give me a sign. And then one of the next things we see is Dean being like, please don't do this. There's a part of me, there's a part of me that's like, maybe that was your sign, Cass.
Well, he's the righteous man, right?
There you go.
Yeah.
Drew, you need to watch the next 2 episodes.
I'm going. Everyone hit pause, wait an hour, I'll be right back. Talk amongst yourselves.
We would. We absolutely would.
Yeah.
I don't doubt you guys can keep so busy for an hour while I go watch the episodes.
Can we talk about that, like that turn in the conversation though, when Dean is like, you know, if you don't stop, I'll, and Cass is like, you'll what?
Mhm.
And then he's like, I'm an angel, you're just a man. And it was such a like, oh, especially because earlier in that same episode, Crowley, like it says, am I the only one who doesn't underestimate these guys?
Mhm.
Like, and he lists off all of these people who have underestimated Dean and Sam. So for him to pull that at the end of the episode, it was this really interesting contrast, and the temperature in the room just changes. I was really interested in hearing people's thoughts about that moment.
Well, Cass has been talking about how pride is his downfall the whole episode, and then does not take that warning to heart.
Notice, I want to point out 2 other times that he's like flexed the fact that he's an angel. First of all, with Sam when he says, "Will you, boy?"
Yes.
Ooh.
And then
Yep.
in this episode, he says to Crowley, "I'm an angel, you ass." But then to Dean, it's much softer. I'm an angel, you're just a man, you know.
I think what's really interesting about this line is that the delivery and the reception are like on 2 different planets, because I can imagine Cass being like, "What are you gonna do?" I can totally see Cass just stating a fact, and the reception of it on Dean's side being like absolutely devastating, because it shows again that like I think it would make Dean question how Cass perceives the relationship, and if he values it anywhere near as much as Dean does. Again, we're gonna be seeing that a lot over the next few seasons.
So I think I talked about on our podcast, Mary, when you talk about like power and control and like who's above who.
Right.
And you know, I've always talked about like in my job, my boss is above me, but he does not know how to do my job at all. And so I have the knowledge. And so he always has to come to me and be like, well, how would you do this? And what would be the best way to do this? And so we're on much more even footing because he has to defer to me with certain things. And so if you look at like Dean and Cass pulling rank and saying, I'm an angel and you're just a man, they had such deep respect for each other and care for each other that they were kind of on even footing. They put each other's opinions and powers or abilities on even keel. And then he's suddenly like, what are you going to do? And it's like, oh, so you've just squashed me in this whole thing.
Right. And that, again, I think speaks to the reception of that comment from Dean, because I don't know if that's what Cass truly is. I mean, maybe it is. I don't know.
I feel like it is. I
Yeah.
feel like it's a reminder, like know your place in this moment. And it's really interesting because just prior to that, he's been talking to Dean about like, you're the one who taught me about free will and freedom. And that's when Dean cuts him off with that childish, like that you're a child comment. And so he's just been deferring to him and the way that Dean has impacted him. And Dean like cuts him, like he doesn't let him finish the thought. And the thought is, you're the one who taught me everything I know and has led me on this path to try to lead everybody else into freedom and free will.
Which
Despite
is a different
like,
level of power.
Right. And so Dean cuts him down, and I think that's Cass pulling the same thing and flipping it back on him and saying, oh, so you're gonna cut me off and try to infantilize me? Well, I'm an angel. You're
Really
just a man.
It's really that point where like you start to lose the argument. You start trying to you start losing face in the argument, and you have to start pulling for the cheap shots. Like, you know, like you're trying to get your point across and the other person is making perfectly valid arguments back to you or like meeting you, and you suddenly go like, I have nowhere else to go, I need like a way to win this, and you pull out either Dean's calling of Cass a child or Cass reminding Dean that he is merely a mortal compared to his angelic status.
Which we've just been told is like ancient. So
Well, I think it also is what the two of them are, their goals of these conversations are in the pulling of rank, and just in the history of the two of their relationship. Like Cass comes into this conversation being like, I'm here to make you understand like my perspective in this. And Dean has no interest in that aspect of it. His goal in the conversation is to change Cass's mind. And so when you're coming at it from those two, like those cheap shots that you're talking about, and like going after each other, or like trying to have an argument, it's like their goals are just one is trying to have an emotional like play on the pathos of the situation, and the other is trying to I think Dean literally says, I'm not going to logic this out with you.
Yeah.
Something like, and Cass is there to logic it out, like to get him to the point where Dean is on board one way or the other. And if we look back at their relationship, it's not the first time that Cass has pulled the power card. Like one of those first conversations that they ever have in Bobby's kitchen, where he like pushes him up against that counter, and they have incredible tension of some sort. I'm not going to label it.
You certainly can if you'd like to, but whatever.
Well, I just think about, when in that Bones episode where like the earthquake happens and Booth just pushes Brennan up against the wall to make sure she's safe.
Yeah.
I wonder if those things have anything in common.
You mean those two shows that were airing about at the same time that were incredibly mirrored with one another in terms of the relationship? I don't know, whatever. I'll let you go on with your point.
These photos.
The three Fs, if two people get close to each other, they either have to fight, fuck, or flee. Like if two people get close, they could fight. They're definitely saying words that might indicate a fight. But whenever that happens, it's usually the other. And so, anyway, or, when Dean tries one of the several times of this show to bring an end to his existence in a certain way, and Cass just comes over, is like, I did this all for you, punches him, throws him up against the alley, that whole scene. Like, Cass has very often shown his like physical ability to just like completely annihilate Dean, and also make the bigger sacrifices in a lot of ways. Like the whole point when they're trying to rescue Adam in the locked angel box, and the only person who can get into that angel box is Cass, and he's like, this is probably going to be my end, and I'm doing this, like I will make that sacrifice. Like I rolls up his sleeves, does the whole, carves the thing, does the whole thing. Like Cass has constantly proven his ability to go further in a lot of ways that Dean isn't always necessarily willing to go for anyone but himself, or but for Sam.
Right.
And so, and Cass's ability to go for the bigger picture. Like he will make those that's what the point I'm making. He's making those sacrifices a lot of time for the bigger picture, while Dean is doing it for personal, emotional connections. And so that pulling of rank, I think, is something that Cass is like, we have history about this. Like I am an angel with incredible power, and it's manipulative as all get out that he does it. But that's something that is in the history of their relationship as well. And I think, but this is the first time that he just flat out like maybe not the first time, but he states it in this moment, while in other moments he's really kind of like shown it.
Something you said about how Dean's only willing to do that for Sam, it's not necessarily in this episode, but just overall, it reminds me of a parent. It's kind of like, I'll do whatever it takes for my child, and I love you, partner, or relationship that I'm in, but it can't supersede my child. And So yeah, he has a priority that's anchoring him to being a little more cautious. And that's what parents have to do. They're not, it's not about them anymore.
We've managed to tie it back to Dean's parentification. I love this. I love this group. This is great.
Being a parent? News? Interesting. Never heard of that.
Oh goodness. Is there anything else that we haven't brought up so far that you'd like to talk about?
Can we just talk about some of our favorite lines, because there were so many good ones?
That's a hard one. Yeah, of course we can.
I'll start because I have one written down. Explaining freedom to angels is a bit like teaching poetry to fish.
That's a good one.
Isn't that a great line? That one stuck with me, like outside of the episode, and it encompasses so much about the struggle that he's going through as he's trying to lead these angels on a different path, which they just haven't been built for, and all that it encompasses. And it's a very poetic line itself, even talking about it's talking about poetry, but it is itself poetic. So that's one of my favorite lines. And there are so many good ones between Crowley and Cass in this episode. Like, anyway, I'm just
nightmares.
Yes. Yes.
Oh my goodness.
That was good.
That was really good.
What was Crowley's last line after Cass had already left, after like throwing him against the wall, like breaking the wall? I feel like he has a last line that was just, I can't remember what it was, but I remember laughing so hard at it.
We'll have to look it up and insert it.
Yeah, there you go. I think, hold on, what was it? Let me see if I can.
Well, glad I came. You're welcome, by the way. You know the difference between you and me. I know what I am. What are you, Castiel? What are you willing to do?
Oh, also, yes.
Yeah.
Is it that one?
No, but
after
it's
that.
It's yeah, that's a different one, but that's also amazing. Because he knows his role. Like Crowley is like, yes, I am the king of hell. I am remodeling hell after my own image. Like, see the changes that I've made. See my ambition. See the photo of me on the wall with my little pitchfork, like on my shoulder. So it's like this amazing moment where he's like, what are you? And like Cass can't answer him.
Yeah, that's such a good one.
For me though, I think it's really just it's the fact that there's two of them in the episode and they are so diametrically opposed, but it is two of the most like amazing looks. And the obvious one is Dean's look of disappointment in Cass as he puts two and two together with the kryptonite line, where it's like it's so clearly in focus, but it's such a powerful and emotive look for all of like the second he's on camera. And then also to go back to hell, it's Cass distractedly looking at the portrait of Crowley behind him while Crowley's talking. It's a very clear like stare at it for a moment, going like, "Oh my god!" And I just think to get both of those amazing looks in an episode on such different parts of the scales just says so much about the way the show is put together.
Absolutely. I have said before, and I will say again, Jensen Ackles is the king of micro expressions. And yeah, that was definitely on full display in this episode.
Definitely.
To your line question about like any particular line, mine has to be, let me tell you my story. Let me tell you everything. That line is that was the line that when I first watched it, I was like, oh. And of course, it's with that whole moment of him looking up in the camera and the smartest choice of having him in the correct lighting to make Misha Collins's blue eyes just boom. I mean, the man's got some pretty blue eyes, and they made it the whole screen. I was like, yes, great choice.
Yes, very, very
See them
much
turn
so.
the contrast up every once in a while.
Yeah, turn that contrast up, throw that filter on. We're just gonna make a boom. which also just makes the whole kryptonite lines and the Superman comparisons later
Yeah,
just
no,
hit
even more
harder.
so.
But the line of "Let me tell you my story, let me tell you everything." Um, so much of the perspective of the story up until this point being the story of Sam and Dean, and Cass coming in later, of course, and like him integrating into the story. Um, let me tell you my story, like having this moment of just like opening up the world so much, and then let me tell you everything about what we were talking about throughout throughout this, being like all the secrets that are revealed, what gets blown up, what gets shown from a different perspective, what moment are we bringing back from an earlier moment and showing almost the exact same scene 2 inches to the left. I think that was just such a smart way, and like we've used the word confessional, we've used in this just the fact that, you know, Castiel, in a season of hiding things and in a season of jumping in and out, and clearly there's something more going on, let me tell you everything, is just such the attention grabber, and it's so smart and so pointed. And then of course that's when you have cut and it's like perfect. That was great structuring. Let me tell you everything. Yes, tell me everything. Commercial break. And you're like,
blessed that I'm watching this in the age of streaming.
Very true.
And no seasonal breaks.
Oh, goodness.
man.
I can't imagine. All of the people who watched it live from the beginning are remarkable humans. I couldn't have handled it.
No, me neither, honestly.
I found Crowley's line, by the way, after Castiel gives an amazing line, which I will read, which is I'm only going to say this once. If you touch a hair on their heads, I will tear it all down. Our arrangement, everything. I'm still an angel, and I will bury you. To which is this amazing moment. Cass has a few more internal monologue lines before the scene ends, and Crowley dusts himself off and just goes, "This is not how synergy works." Because he's so like, to him, it's a business plan.
It's a
But for him,
buzzword.
it's a buzzword. It's a business plan. This
Oh
to
my
him
gosh.
is purely a business dealing.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Love
Very
Crowley.
much so.
I love Crowley so much.
My
Oh my
favorite
God.
line is an exchange when Dean, you know, it's the crack. Dean finally gets through to him, and you know, Castiel saying it's complicated, and Dean saying no, actually it's not, and you know that. Why else would you keep this whole thing a secret? And then he makes it a we. He says, when crap like this comes around, we deal with it like we always have. What we don't do is we don't go out and make another deal with the devil. So again, like, we're a unit. This is what we do. You're part of our team. We do this. And he says, it sounds so simple when you say it like that. Where were you when I needed to hear it? He said, I was there. Where were you? And he literally was there. He was there raking leaves.
Yeah.
He was raking
there.
leaves, and Cass refused to pull him in.
Well, that we has always been Dean and Sam, and it's never included Cass before. And, you know, it's maybe a little unreasonable of Dean to assume that Cass knew that he was included in that we.
That's
Which
a really interesting thing.
He brings up at the end calling him like a brother in that final scene, in the very emotional, manipulative moment. He waits to then, you know, use that kind of familiar language in order to try to convince him or manipulate him back to this moment, but also to the need for family. The rejection of that is almost like the confirmation that they're not brothers in this moment. Like, this is not that's not how this relationship functions, and it's definitely not how the relationship functions for Cass in that moment. And so, like, I think it's really interesting that they bring it up, and they mention it kind of a few times in the show, this existence of this, like, really defining what the relationship is between Cass and Dean. But like, this is a moment where Cass actively rejects that classification because Dean is using that classification to manipulate him, which is, I think, very, very interesting in their overarching, I'm going to use the word romance.
Well, it's conditional versus unconditional. You know, we have some family issues that, you know, people make it clear that their love for you is conditional. And it's, you know, and we, you know, as parents make it clear that no, I unconditionally love you. There are no conditions attached to the love I have for you. And he's saying, you were like a brother to us if you followed what we wanted you to do. Now you're not.
Yeah,
That's
you
pretty
were
manipulative.
like a brother to us.
You've had your brother card revoked.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. But it's very much like, if we're gonna go there, it's very much a breakup scene.
Yeah.
1000%.
That end thing. And I think it's really interesting because we've talked about, I think we touched upon it earlier, the jokes that are not jokes. And we have one of those in this episode where we're talking about, like, where Bobby is talking about Superman gone dark side.
Mhm.
And Dean says to Sam, that makes you Lois Lane. And it's this really interesting moment, right? Because he feels the need to verbally, like, he's thinking about it. And he's telling Sam, you're Lois Lane, which means not me. Yeah.
Which is what Dean always does, always deflects to Sam in these situations, right? Like, we've seen him do it time and time again as jokes throughout the series so far. So, yeah.
When he's so clearly Lois Lane in this situation.
Exactly. But literally, like, nobody out, like, my brain didn't go there. I wasn't thinking, well, then who's Lois Lane? But Dean is. Dean's
Padme to Anakin. Don't go where I can't follow. You're breaking my heart.
No, Dean has. I mean, Dean has more emotions than Anakin, which isn't saying much. So.
No, Dean's Padme.
Castiel
has more emotions.
Oh yeah, which is also not saying much.
Wow.
It's a tight battle there, actually.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because I watched a few episodes leading up to this episode, so I kind of remember where we'd been and what had just happened, and the number of moments where there are these, like, jokes that are really now it's just awkward, like, watching them and going, but, like, they're really pointing up that there's something more here. And so I thought it was a very interesting moment that Dean felt the need to say that, and Sam's just like, whatever. Like,
exactly. And again, this dynamic of Bobby and Sam not responding to that, like, again, this, protecting him and being like, yes, okay, we won't say anything about that, it's fine. And if you've watched the past few episodes, like, from before, they do that repeatedly, where they're like, maybe you should make the call, you know, like just a couple episodes ago, I think in Frontierland, you know, maybe you should make the call. And it's very like, it's just a suggestion. It's an invitation. It's fine. Again, everyone in the room knows what's going on.
This is a safe space, Dean, if you want to tell us anything.
Right, exactly. You don't even need to say anything. Like, it's okay. It's fine.
This episode, when they pray to Cass, Sam tries first. And when they don't get a response, Dean immediately tries. And then when Cass still doesn't show up, Sam just, like, kind of, like, gives him a little pat on the shoulder, and then it's like, let's do some work so you don't have to think about that too hard.
Well, this is the jokes, which thoughts, I'll get to some more thoughts on the jokes in a second, but, like, the jokes always should have, like, a kernel of truth to them. So if we keep making these jokes, there should be some truth to it. Though, of course, then you always have to ask, like, who is the joke for, and what is the joke? What is the actual punchline? Which often the joke that they are trying to make is gay is funny, coming from a completely, you know, presumably at this point mostly straight writers' room. We do get some queer writers a little bit later, but dang it, I spoiled something.
No, it's something to look forward to.
Yeah, a little something to look forward to. But, like, what are those jokes? What, like, the jokes are almost always, oh, it's funny because that's gay. But then again, if it is a joke, like, what is funny about that, I think is really interesting in how we reframe it watching back. and watching from a full perspective and over time and everything. I also think about like the time that this was released. That was really, really the height. Like probably around the first like 5, 6 seasons was really the height of like the conversations around like that was when the Hillary Duff, when you say that's gay, do you know what you say? Stop the hate. Like those were the height of those conversations and that changing of
the memory you just unlocked for me there. Oh my god, I can't remember those.
Yeah, those came out I think in 2007, 2008, so like early season 3, season 2, yeah, around that era. And so like, and these were the conversations happening in schools about like like little middle schoolers and early high schoolers having to have conversations about the rights of queer people in their classrooms. Like that was when that was really, really, blowing up. And so a lot of these jokes were active involvement in those conversations and very clearly taking a side.
Yeah, they're grown men hanging by just clawing to keep those jokes. Like, no, you're not going to change us. Oh yeah, you all are squawking about it, but no, these are funny. God damn it.
Exactly. And so then like looking back at it post all that, what is perceptions of media change over time about how people watch it and what people draw from it. And we talked about this before when I was on last time talking about post convention Denver 2021. About the viewing Dean in this queer light and viewing those jokes. All right, if this is, you're going to make these jokes, this is a kernel of truth, and that there is truth to this, and the reclamation of this character in this story like being an active form of rebellion against a homophobic society and a homophobic perspective of writing. And how this episode really also was like a turning point in the legitimacy of this interpretation, and how this was, if going to some fandom history about like when Destiel became like real, like real. This came out in 2011, height of right before the 2012 Tumblr boom. When if we're going to talk about like how it became like a cultural moment, like a internet cultural moment, it was right around in this moment and right after this episode, because it really legitimized a lot of what was already happening in the earlier seasons, and that reclamation of this story and the truth that comes out in this episode, both during the time and as we look back. That was a really complicated way of getting to my point. I hope that made sense.
No,
I followed it.
It did.
Sweet, cool. This episode was important if you didn't get that aspect by this point.
Honestly, when it comes to the jokes now, the way that I look at it and the way that I talk about it with Drew is like, if I saw this playing out, we had this conversation recently about like the casket out of my ass line, right? Like if I were to see this play out in my daily life between two people that I knew, I would just be like, oh, okay, there's something going on there. I'm just, I'm just going to look away and whatever, like this. But I'm going to take it seriously. Like, to me, it's not like I no longer see the joke. I just see like, oh, this is humor to deflect, right? That kernel of truth, like we're deflecting from it and we're going like towards trying to make fun of it, right?
I think it speaks to the fact that there was an active conversation happening about these two characters and what they were to each other, and somebody felt the need to address it repeatedly and keep deflecting, as you say, which ironically only serves to underline the very thing that they're trying to deflect from. So it's definitely, like as I say, nobody else is thinking about Lois Lane in that moment, but Dean is. So his brain is going there. He's processing thoughts that speak to his state of mind and where his focus is and where his mind is going. And it is a very different, it is, as it's interesting that you say in terms of this being a turning point, JJ, like it is a very different kind of joke from Cass Get Out of My Ass 2 or 3 episodes earlier. And I think like my final thought about all of this is that he ends talking about how it's a tragedy, right? And all I can think of is romantic tragedy because you're seeing the disintegration of a relationship happen in real time. And so I think it's interesting that Cass names it as a tragedy, and then sort of like deflects from it a little bit himself and is like, maybe from a human perspective, but I think the human perspective might be important. Like, I don't remember exactly how he phrases it, but he names it as tragedy in this episode where it's been very much about the relationship between these two characters and it falling apart. So my brain went, oh, romantic tragedy.
Yeah.
So,
you know, if I can answer your question from earlier about my favorite line, and again tie it with this idea of like the final thoughts about this. Katie and I are like, you know, on the same page when it comes to that, because my favorite is I was there, where were you? Because it reminds me of arguments that I've had with romantic partners, without necessarily using those words, but just being like, I was there with you when this happened. Like, how can we have such different perspectives on this? Or how come you didn't lean on me? How come this, like all of those unanswered questions, usually that come near the end of a relationship. So yeah, I agree with the romantic tragedy reading.
Or how many romantic tragedies have used those specific lines in other media?
I don't know.
And just, you know, I'm also pretty sure Bones uses it at one point just to bring
Yeah,
that back in. Like, I'm
think
pretty
they
sure
do.
they have an argument about presence in each other's lives, you know,
Absolutely,
when
they do.
one of them disappears to South America.
It's a bit of dialogue to remember, just saying.
Yeah.
yes.
It's definitely in the long game. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
There is go. All of a sudden, so many scenes just flashed in my mind. I do have a final thought for Drew to like think about maybe in the next 2 episodes for like watching the next 2 episodes.
Lay it on me.
And going forward, this is okay. I'm gonna say the question, but it's a little bit deeper than what the question is that whose side are you on at the end of the episode? Are you on Cass's side? Are you on Dean's side? If you had to make a choice,
Who gets you in the divorce?
who gets you in the divorce, and why? And the reason why I ask that is because this is the first time in the show where it's not everyone, but in conversations I've had with other people who've watched the show, this is the first time where they're not rooting for Sam and Dean, that they are actively rooting for another player over in this story over Sam and Dean. And maybe you are, and you're still wanting, of course, Sam and Dean to like succeed, of course, but like in who are you rooting to be right in this situation, and what does right in this situation look like? And I love your smile at that question. But yeah, who gets you in the divorce?
I mean, to answer that part first, I would run away with Uncle Crowley for a little bit to let everyone cool down.
Oh, incredible.
Stay with Uncle Crowley for a bit and decompress.
I didn't know there was a right answer, but I just heard it.
Yeah.
Just gonna harvest eggs all day. That's what you're gonna do.
Do you win caviar?
I'm so proud that I earned that one. And you know, you bring this up, and it never really occurred to me to pick sides, but I mean, Mary can attest that I have been referring to this as kind of like the potential of reaching a like Cass villain arc where he would kind of become the villain. But he doesn't. He's just viewing a problem from a different angle. And I mean, I agree with Dean in the whole, like, you shouldn't be partnering with the devil and doing what the devil wants. But at the same time, I'm also understanding Cass has reached, like, I feel like he's reached a limit, and like the only way out of this is going to be magical mumbo jumbo TV writer make something magical happen that we couldn't have predicted with Dean and Sam somehow. But like from where they're standing right now, I think Cass is right.
Interesting. The big smiles on everyone's face is just so telling.
We can't talk about anything.
She can't talk.
Oh, I'm so used to it. Don't worry.
I'm so glad that there are other people who share in my pain.
Yeah, no. I think that's what that is really interesting though. Like, back to Ben Udland. Who would have thought I would have brought it back in the rounding it out. Ben Udland's ability to write the episode that is that shows so much of Dean's inner perspective, and at the end of the episode you're not rooting for him, and that's not the goal. The goal is I think Ben's goal was to have you be rooting for Cass in this episode. Talking about this again like a memory play, the whole point of a memory play is often to show horrible choices and make you have you empathize with the horrible choice and then make you think about why you empathize with the horrible choice, or make you see that people are making the absolute best choices that they can in any given moment, and what are the consequences of that. Like, memory plays are so powerful in that way, and like about the unreliable narrator. That wasn't right either. You guys know what I'm saying.
We know. It's fine.
But yeah, Ben Udland's ability to make you care more about another character besides Sam and Dean is really, really powerful, and a really, really powerful tool. And what are the consequences of that moving forward in the story, and how the writers continue to approach that, and what the audience, how does that feel as an audience member for these two characters, like Sam and Dean, these two brothers, these leads of the show, like the center point of it for 6 seasons, for you not to make them not want to win, to make them want to be wrong. Like, that's such a powerful writer that can do that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Katie and KJ, do you guys have any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
I do.
Yeah.
Do it.
People who are listening to this maybe aren't super familiar with me. I'm a Destiel shipper, but I'm like, Sam's my favorite character in the show, and like that's not always like the most popular choice. But I think about Sam a lot, and I think that Sam and Cass are similar in a lot of ways, and especially in this episode. They both have this like desire to like make Dean proud, and they often have good intentions that, you know, their way of getting to those good, like working through those good intentions ends up being a problem for everyone else. And in this episode in particular, they have the same kind of fatal flaw, which is like arrogance and pride. And Sam just had a whole like pseudo villain arc where he like went down a dark path, and he tried to explain how he ended up there, but it was never shown the way that this episode shows Cass's motivation. Like there's that one episode where Sam explains how he ended up sleeping with Ruby, but it doesn't really like go through the emotional stuff that Sam was going through to get him to that point.
Yeah.
And like my favorite line I think from this episode is from Crowley, where Crowley says, "I know what I am. What are you, Castiel? And what exactly are you willing to do?" Because Sam and Cass have both operate under like this very strong belief that they're doing good and they're right, and everyone else just doesn't understand what they're trying to do. And sometimes they are right, and sometimes they're not. And like when we get to the end of the episode, Cass is like pleading with God for a sign. He's like, "But if there isn't a sign, then I'm just gonna do what I think is right." It's not even caring that Dean has already asked him not to do it.
Yes, exactly. Like he's asking for a sign, but then when something that could easily be interpreted as a sign comes to him, or he literally goes to seek it out. Exactly. It's not what he wants to do, so he's just going to do whatever he thinks is best.
That is such Sam and Dean energy, though.
I learned it from watching you.
He was looking at the wrong one, Katie.
The one time he wasn't paying attention to Dean. One time.
I will say also, like Dean brought up like when like they were like in a really bad place, like Cass was on their side, and the reason like that has like stuck with Dean so much is because Cass just like beat the shit out of him, and it was like, I rebelled for you, and I'm like, Cass, try hitting them again. Like, I'm not really one for like violence, but like clearly that message stuck, and whatever you're trying to do in this episode, Dean's not listening.
Well, Dean being a masochist and all.
Yeah.
It's also really like such a testament to like their relationship, Cass and Dean, that like Cass does go back to Dean after and is like, just hear me out and like listen to what I'm trying to tell you, because clearly Sam is going to be more empathetic to someone who's trying to do the right thing and gone down a path that's maybe ill-advised. Like, that is something Sam just went through not that long ago. I mean, he's a little bit mad at the moment about the whole soul thing, but like, I just feel like he would be more willing to hear that out and like hear Cass out. Sam does tend to listen a little bit more sometimes, but like for Cass to not care about that and go to Dean is just like such a testament to like how much he cares about what Dean thinks and how much he wants Dean to understand him.
Okay, so I'm sorry, but this is bringing up like a thought. I'm so sorry. Like, because we're starting this episode with Cass telling us the whole story, right? Telling us everything. But then he goes to Dean to try to do the same thing, right? To try to explain himself. But I really like your observation that you're saying that he would have been heard had he gone, or he would have most likely gotten heard had he gone to Sam. So maybe the goal wasn't to be heard. So then what is the goal of speaking to the audience? Is it a confessional? Is it an argument?
Justification.
Is it what is going on here? Who is he speaking to, really? Is he speaking to God? He's speaking to what's going on?
It's a shower argument. It's the argument you have in your head in the shower afterwards, all the things you wish you had said but couldn't get to. This is him failing the conversation with Dean, rehearsing what he wished he had said to him and regretting not getting out.
Stop it, because now I'm thinking of the unreliable narrator and I'm like, did any of that actually happen?
No, but I mean,
it did. Let's not go there.
Oh goodness!
I would cancel this episode. This episode happened twice.
Oh my goodness.
Well, I mean, no episode of Supernatural has a reliable narrator. Like, the Ghostfacers effect exists.
Yes.
Another Ben Edlund episode.
So just real quick with Ben Edlund, like I really want to know the inside baseball of how he was able to write the episode and direct the episode, because that's such an anomaly. Are there any other episodes where the person who wrote it also directed it?
I think that I know just of. Eric at the end of season 4, and that's because Kim Manners died before they filmed it. Like, he would have directed it otherwise.
I wonder if he like pitched it, he convinced them, he was like, this is what I want to do and I have a vision and let me do it. So that's interesting.
Well, I mean, when you wite a script like this, it's you know, that's a vision.
It's yours.
Hand it over and you're like, well, actually, I'll just do it.
I'm just imagining him trying to explain to some like one-off director what he wants, and the director just being like, you do this.
Yeah. It's like when you're doing a class project and this one colleague has like a vision, right, of where they're going with something, and you're like, maybe you should just take on this part of the project, like.
And Robert Singer's like, well, I'll direct it, and Ben Edlund's like, no, please, God, no.
Oh goodness, thank you so much, all of you, for hanging out with us this evening, for taking so much of your time out of your day to talk to us about a Supernatural episode. We so very much appreciate it. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for having
Genuinely, this has been such an amazing. I'm so happy to have this little family formed around my infantile viewing of this episode. So thank you all for coming along and making this what was already a very emotional journey a much more complete one.
Would you like to let us know where we can find you on social media? Katie?
Oh, yeah. I am on Twitter On I'm Dusty L. Cannon.
Catherine?
You can find Krisha and I with our podcast on at the Fangirl Biz, B-I-Z or B-I-Z. And I'm under at Catherine in NB if you want to check out my stuff.
JJ, you're on TikTok.
I am on TikTok and Twitter at
Yes,
JJBWayWatch. And I'm scattered. You might come across me on a podcast somewhere. I'm scattered around places.
And KJ?
Yeah, I'm at SBN Opinions KJ on TikTok and at SBN Opinions Pod on Twitter, and yeah, podcasting everywhere that podcasts exist.
Yes. We'll have the details of that all in the show notes as well as in the YouTube description. So once again, thank you so much. You've been listening to Carrying Wayward, a supernatural podcast produced by Rochelle Castellano, hosted by Drew Schulman and myself, Marie Vigourou. Thank you to everyone supporting us on Ko-fi or Patreon, and an extra thank you to our bunker supporters, Katira, Elle, and Jeremiah Thomas.
This week, we'd like to thank all of our guests for recording this episode with us. You can find the links to everyone's social media accounts in the show notes, and we highly recommend that you take some time and go follow everyone.
And if you like Carrying Wayward and you'd like to support our project to go through all 15 seasons of Supernatural, you can support us through Ko-fi or Patreon, and you can find those links at carryingwayward.com.
Does everyone want to say it with me? Carry on, our wayward friends. I've never worked over Zoom, but we tried.
I was like,
Yeah, I know. I was like,
You had this
Zoom's
problem.
not going to allow for this.
No, but at least we tried, and that's what counts.
Just like Cass.
Aww.